Welcome to the Real Kyper at Noon show, and welcome to the strangest off season in NHL history. It's hard to believe that we are now going into an off season and we're in October. And more bizarre is the NHL Draft tonight. But we took the day off yesterday to bring back draft version of the show. We've got Doug Maclean. He's right there listening to all of this. We also have Mike Fuda, a terrific listen. He'll give you an in-depth feel of what it's like to go into a draft. Of course, we got Doug Maclean, who's did it for many years with the Columbus Blue Jackets. So, Mac, just to bring you in before we go to the Mike Fuda interview, just about as bizarre as you can get what we're staring at, not only going into tonight, but the next few weeks, the next few months.
Well, it really is, because number one, you don't know when you're going to play. I mean, the NHL is talking now January 1st as a startup date, and training camps maybe mid-December. But you know what? For the scouts and the hockey people and organizations, it's the draft. So yeah, it's not June where we usually have it, but it's still the draft. Yeah, it's virtual. It's not in Montreal where it was supposed to be in June. So it is different, but it still is the draft. And talking to scouts that we're heading on to their cities to get ready for this virtual draft, they're as excited as ever. They're scouring the list. So it's no different to them other than the time of year. It's still important. And you look at some of the teams with an abundance of draft picks, whether it's the Senators with a ton of picks, the Rangers, like a bunch of teams with some extra picks. You've got Toronto that picked up a first-round pick with their trade with Pittsburgh. So there's excitement in the organization. So even though it's a weird time of year, it's pretty exciting. As Fuda attests to, this is what they work their tails off for all year.
Well, and you go down through social media, and of course, the insiders, and I've been one on occasion, try to kind of stir it up and keep the interest. And there is huge interest, Mac. There's no question. Winnipeg Jets are at the edge of their seat waiting to hear news on Patrick Laine. Arizona has got a good property in Ekman Larson, who people are waiting to see if he goes to Vancouver or Boston. And then you get the reality of, hold on, everybody, we're in a pandemic. And our greatest hockey player on the planet currently, Connor McDavid, tested positive, and that's when reality sets in.
Oh, man. I mean, this is unbelievable that, you go through 40,000 tests and Connor McDavid leaves there healthy, obviously, and then this happens to a couple of pretty big names in the world have come down with COVID-19. We've got a guy in Washington, D.C., the president of the United States, and now Connor McDavid, one of the biggest names in hockey. I mean, wow.
Yeah, it's nuts. And we know he's been in Toronto area, works out with Gary Roberts in that group. So, it's a nervous time for those guys training right now. So let's hope Connor
totally
has mild symptoms and can get over this really quick.
And you know how healthy a guy Connor is. You know what age he is. So yeah, you just hope all the best for one of the biggest names in the world of hockey and a good kid. So best wishes.
Well, we mentioned the Philadelphia Flyers a little bit being linked to Patrick Laine. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Niskanen retiring, Mac.
Yep.
Justin Braun re-upping, Devin Dubnyk getting traded, Spezza signing with the Leafs again. There's so much to get into, but let's focus on Mike Fuda now and give our watchers and listeners a chance to get an in-depth feel of what it's like to run a draft from a scouting perspective. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Real Kyper at Noon show, the draft edition. Wow, we go away for one day and we see a ton of news leading up to the draft day. No bigger news than Connor McDavid coming down with COVID while he was training in Toronto. But we had trades, we had signings, and we expect that to continue throughout the week, going right into unrestricted free agency. But before then, I thought it'd be great to get an expert, a real expert on the draft. And nobody better, nobody bigger than my first guest, Mike Fuda. I've known Mike for quite a while. 5 years with the Owen Sound as the general manager before helping lead the Los Angeles Kings to 2 Stanley Cups as assistant general manager and director of player personnel. He is kind enough to join us right now. Foots, how are you, pal?
Good, Kipper. How you keeping?
Hey, I know presently you're not with any NHL team in particular, but you have been doing some consulting. I know you're going to be busy with SportsNet tonight during the show. My only question is how much BS can you take from Elliot Friedman in one night?
Well, we had rehearsals yesterday, so I'm fully versed in the BS between him and Berkey and Cause and Trevor. It's a learning experience. I felt like I was back in a dressing room with all the chirping that's going on. There's some world-class chirping, but I also have a new respect for that side of the camera. How professionally, I tell you, there's a lot different than doing a hit where you can. Last night, all I did was practice speaking in 20-second segments and then shutting myself off. So it's quite unique, but they're good crew.
You'll have some fun for sure. No question about that. And we're going to have fun watching. So all the best with that. But before I send you off to SportsNet, I want to get a feel for someone that has experienced it and lived it. What is it like, Mike, to go into a draft when you know it's your moment? Is it any different than a performer on stage because you spend every day of the year preparing for this moment? What does it feel like for you going into a draft?
Kipper, it's an incredible feeling. I think you said it best there. It is. You feel like a performer for a scout or a director of scouting, whatever your title is, and it's like your Super Bowl, right? The night before, you can't sleep. You're going over your list. You know how hard you've worked. I can only imagine, for example, like in with Mark and Eddie's case with the Los Angeles Kings, having the extra time with the COVID to beat yourself up, knowing where you're slotted, knowing where you're going to be picking, getting it down to 2 players, knowing, this draft, it's kind of similar in the fact to the 2008 draft, Kipper, when we were picking second overall, and the media claimed it was called the Stamkos Sweepstakes, but internally we had Drew Doughty at number 1, so it wasn't as much of a thing. We were killing ourselves trying to figure out if we, knowing that Stammer was always going number 1, are we missing somebody here that we should be catching up to Drew? And you're just going over assignments. Sometimes you start to find warts in a player that just aren't there. But again, knowing you're at number 2 and you're not going to move the pick and you're going to get a stud, and it worked out so well for us. And then you look at that draft class. 3 of them picked up Stanley Cups last week, with Stammer and Shen and Bogosian picking up their first cups. But you got Pietrangelo wigged in there too. So you got 3 kind of Hall of Famers and a couple real character guys that have had great careers. And then you look at a draft, I'd say like a 2015, where we're coming off a Stanley Cup. And as you said, it's kind of like a movie, but the script can change because you're looking at your pick. I think we were 14 or 15. And the night before, Dean Lombardi throws at me, goes, "Hey, Foots, I'm going up for a couple beers. If there's any way we can get Milan Lucic or Joe Thornton, here are the parameters for the deal, make some phone calls." So I make a couple calls. I call San Jose, and they're not going to be parting with Joe Thornton. I put in a call to John Ferguson, and all of a sudden, Dean, having given me the parameters, what I can work with, because Milan Lucic was obviously someone that he coveted, and as well as the organization at the time, he says, "Putes, put our first in play. Here's a list of prospects," and we couldn't sign goaltender Martin Jones at the time. So I'm down with my draft list going over who we took at 15. All of a sudden, a spark writes up with John Ferguson Jr., and he's like, "Foots will move Milan, but it's going to take your first." We kind of bantered over on the prospects, which it wasn't my butt to close the deal, and Jonesy was going to be the goaltender. I go up and knock on the door, and Dean's having a couple beers, and I said, "Dean, Thornton's not available, but I think if you get on the phone with Don Sweeney, there's a deal for there's a deal for Milan Lucic, and he told me, F off, get out of the room. You're kidding. And in typical Dean fashion and stuff like that. And I said, no, you got to make the call. He went down, and half an hour later, the deal's consummated. And so instead of having the script where we're going up picking at 14 or 15, that picks off the table. And I'm sure there are a few ticked off amateur scouts at the time, because that's like when you take away picks for an amateur scout are like the last piece of steak on a plate. Yes. You just, and then that's great. You work all year, you want to be able to use those, but if you pull off a trade like that at that time, whether it worked out or not, it was unbelievable how quickly it came together. And then in an amateur scout, so the trade goes through, moves on, and then you've got your scout sitting there at the table. And I remember in retrospect, because we're always sitting there, I wonder what pick who would we have had if we were still at our pick, and the name on our list was Matt Barzell. So wow. It's one of those. So it's quite the show.
Foots, in terms of now where we are with COVID, and we're going to go virtual tonight. Typically, every draft is like this massive convention where guys meet. Your team probably with LA got in there. Typically, if it's a weekend draft, a Friday draft, you would get in there Monday or Tuesday. You'd start working the room. Guys would meet at lunches, bars, conference rooms, behind a plant. All of that in prep of what are you hearing, who's available and who's not. With COVID now, is that lost?
Well, I think the atmosphere is going to be lost, and I think you can't help the social aspect, the fact everybody coming together, the rumor mill that's flowing. I mean, being able to, when you have those meetings, where your scouts are kind of out bird dogging, looking for stuff, and you're bringing your stuff back to the GM, and he's working the phone, and the reality of what really is out there. I mean, there's always a ton of rumors, and at the time, obviously, members of the media like yourself and the boys are buzzing our phones off. Like, what's going on? What's going on?
What's going on?
I'm like, Kyper, if somebody sees your number coming through, I'm going to get gas. But you guys, it's great. And you guys have a lot of insight too. You can set the momentum too on something you might be onto that I might not have heard. And then I can go, wow, I can pretend that I'd heard that one and said, well, I got to get to this. There might be some legs to this because these guys know what they're doing. But I just think the whole thing, and I'm sure the NHL is going to look at it, because I'm sure everybody's going to be trying to save money, and by not having to fly your entire staff in and do the hotel and that many nights and do things over Zoom, it might end up in the long run saving people money. But the overall atmosphere there, and the kids being able to go up on stage, and just the persona of looking at that draft floor, I think it's a huge part of the of NHL history, and the general managers getting up on the floor and walking over, and all of a sudden you look on the side and whatever, Brian Burke's having a conversation with Dean Lombardi, and the whole place is just glued to it, thinking, when's the next trade coming down? And who knows, they could be asking whether they're having a pastrami sandwich or not, but it's that whole taking that, hey, 3 general managers, Stevie Yzerman is approached here, and then, we have a trade to announce. And just in general, I find the whole Zoom thing, having gone through the interviews, as much as it's efficient, you do lose a lot of the human emotion involved in it, even trying to hook up, as you saw me trying to get on your show this morning. But I just think you're opening yourself up some glitches. And I mean, even yesterday, I heard when the NFL draft went on, the night before was just a disaster, trying to go from Gary in New York to Alex Lafreniere and his home to the team that's selecting him in New York. And it's just I know modern technology is amazing, but you're asking for an accident, and the fluidity of a great show sometimes loses its beat when you're going from screen to screen. But hopefully they get it right. And I know how much pride they have, especially after pulling off what they did in the bubble. You'd hate to have a bunch of glitches on a draft show when it's kind of bringing a little bit of closure heading into free agency. But the NHL's just done a wonderful job of this, so I'm sure they'll be able to figure it out.
Well, we got our fingers crossed for you, Sportsnet, NBC, and the whole gang that's trying to put this thing together, because we know life doesn't stand still, even in a pandemic. You got to keep going. You got to keep moving on. So we'll hope for the best in today's show. In saying that, there's a whole hockey world out there watching me and you right now, expecting to see some movement. We know what the appetite is for this type of news and information. And we also know, Foots, that, whether it happens in the next 5 minutes or an hour or 3 months from now, a name like Patrick Laine, he's going to move. People, you don't have to be a cap expert to understand that it just doesn't fit anymore in Winnipeg for Patrick Laine. I saw this 2 years from now. People thought I was crazy that Winnipeg would ever trade Patrick Laine, but that's the reality of it. And there's going to be great interest in watching that moving forward. But does it happen in the next 24 hours? Do you get a sense that we will see a couple of deals? Has there ever been a scenario where you've ever heard that the league would say, okay, if that trade's going to happen, let's wait for the draft. Let's put it around the show. Let's pump this up. That certainly is a big part of what happens during the draft.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I know even this, like when we talked, first of all, the media is so good at finding out these things that it'd really be hard to hold on to something that anyways. I know just the example I gave you, the Lucic deal, they wanted to hold that. They wanted to hold that to the draft. And then so Gary can do is we have a trade to announce right out of the gate. But it's just really hard to, in these days, now you've got no trade player movements. You've got to talk to an agent and somehow it leaks out. I do agree with your assessment on Laine. I've never seen anything like it because when you've got a player that's special and he's that huge an asset, Winnipeg's got to get what they feel is a just reward for a player of that caliber. I mean, it's like when you pick a player that high and he fails, it's one thing. But when you pick a player that high and he's still got a shot that's like Ovechkin, like you've got to make sure you're getting the right thing back. And in this environment, I'm sure that's as much as there's probably some suitors out there. It's a harder thing to make. Like everybody talks about the salary cap being flat. Well, there's also a lot of teams that I'm sure owners have set internal caps that as much as it looks like there's cap space to us from the outside, the owners might be saying, hey, we're not in a spot to be spending that kind of money this year. And I'm sure there's been some really super for a fan, great hockey trades that have been talked about internally by managers that have probably been snuffed out by the fact that the money's not just working going back and forth. And I think that's one of the COVID things is this whole deal about it's hard to move money at this time. But it's not, I think you could also say, like you look at the kid in Edmonton who everybody felt by now would be moved to, right? PRV, right? And it should, you thought at the time, you'd think at the time a kid with that kind of still had a glow to him, he'd be moved by now. And now here we are 2 years later, and they haven't been able to find the fit. The polish has worn off a bit, and they're not getting the value they want, and it's still on hold. But I think there's going to be enough suitors out there for Laine that the thing's going to drop. And it always seems to heat up again because if you want one of these picks, clearly you want a first round pick to be a part of a package like that. So it's got to happen today because the first round pick burns out.
I got to ask you, like I'm watching Bill Armstrong now in Arizona, and wow, welcome to being a general manager. Oh, by the way, trade a guy that's got over $8 million for 7 more years and only have 2 teams. Good luck getting any type of value out of a team when they know how desperate you are. So as a scout, if you're on the other side and potentially your first round pick might be on the table to get moved at the last second, God, that must be a little frustrating, eh? You work so hard all year. You think you're going to be slotted somewhere, and the general manager pulls the rug from right underneath you. How does that feel as a scout when that happens?
I think that was part of the maturation process for me. Early, it was like you had that little. It was more kind of having your area. You could see your area guys feel a little deflated as far as like. I think you had to have a brave face and understanding that at that stage your team was trying to get better, and that's part of the process involved. I mean, I think early in my career it would have been, oh geez, that's too bad. We're not going up on stage or all that work, and we got our hair all done for nothing kind of thing. And then it's like, and then you realize that's part of the business. That's part of the industry. I think for me, it became much harder trading a face on the pick. So for me, trading away a pick and acquiring a player that was going to help us win a Stanley Cup didn't hit me as hard emotionally as it was when all of a sudden, for example, like it was Wayne Simmons and Braden Shen being traded. And there's a name on the number because now you've developed a relationship, and it's not just a slot. It's a personality that you've spent all this time recruiting. And even that we knew. And Mike Richards, I mean, I coached Mike Richards and I knew exactly Captain Canada, we were getting back the real deal. But that was probably one of the toughest calls, because you're not calling slot number 15 and slot number 16. Yeah. You're calling Braden Shen and Wayne Simmons, who I've known since he was 16, 17 years old. I think those trades are tougher on you emotionally than just trading a slot.
Nick Kypreos here with Mike Fuda, a top NHL executive during draft day. We're so lucky to have him. He'll be working with SportsNet tonight in the 2020 NHL Draft, virtual draft. I got to think that going into this draft tonight, so much talk about what did the media tab, Alexis Lafreniere, the great Quebec hope. You know, you talk about all these greats, Rocket Richard, Beliveau, Lafleur, Mario, and now everybody out of Quebec expects this guy to fall into that historical pecking order. Is that the way you see it? This is a can't-miss superstar in the making, Mike?
I see he's a can't. But there's a different quality of superstar now. Like, you opened up your show by talking about the gentleman that caught COVID.
Yes.
That's a different type of player in Connor McDavid. And I think even that year they talk, like Austin Matthews, they talk about generational type players. He's got some work to do, but he's a superstar. I think you get to the point when you're starting to throw so many accolades, you're either a superstar or a generational superstar. You're pretty darn good. Yeah. McDavid's in an act by his own. This kid's a special player, Lafreniere. I think the thing that people like about him is his consistency. Every time that you find out the more you look at these great players, the more warts you try and find. You run out of great accolades, so you try to find things that are wrong with them. And it's really hard. I used the analogy like last night. It's like trying to find a pimple on a supermodel. It's like ridiculous. It's like, what are you going to do? The kid, they say, he's not tough enough, so this year he runs over people all year. His durability showed when he got hurt at the World Junior Championship, and you say the best players always rise to the top. He comes back and gets the job done. I mean, he checks all the boxes. He's a wonderful kid. He's driven. I mean, I think he's ready to play in the league next year. I think, he's going to go into a spot. It's unfortunately, I kind of agree with Berkey, not as vehemently as does, but he's like, it's a shame that a team that kind of deserved him didn't get him a little more than the Rangers through a lottery pick. But that's the way that it was drawn up, and they're very fortunate. Good for them. But it'll be great for the city of New York to have a player like that. But even the fact that there were teams, I know they were never going to trade him, but I do think there was some substance to the fact that there might have been something there with Eichel to at least think about. That tells you that there's, if somebody called to ask about Connor McDavid the night before the draft, it would have been an embarrassing call to make. Whereas right. I think there is incredibly, incredibly high this kid's upside is. I don't think that's the same situation, that there could have been a package put together that it might have made sense from a hockey standpoint.
Well, because, and we've talked about this on this show with Doug Maclean for probably a good month now. He's not a centerman. The New York Rangers need centermen. They're pretty covered on the wings, and that's why the link won't necessarily go away with Jack Eichel. And we all know, and we've heard it, Foots, that Eichel isn't very happy in Buffalo. And, whatever they're kind of saying today doesn't necessarily mean that it'll go away forever here. So in saying that, is there still a possibility that the Rangers could go and not necessarily make a move for Eichel, because we know that probably is off the table for at least now, but could they even flip with LA? Could you see that scenario where they end up drafting their centerman and taking a prospect or a top pick, or maybe even a defenseman that has potential? Is that a possibility here?
I think anything's a possibility. I don't see it happening. I think it's kind of set in stone that they would want to know. I mean, and I think Byfield's going to be an absolute stud too. But I think if there's such a more finished product in Lafreniere, which exactly what he's going to be, that I think it'd be pretty risky on them to not, unless they were acquiring something that's a proven superstar. as opposed to another prospect, so to speak. There's a little bit of a risk factor there, but no, I think they're going to take Lafreniere, and I think they're going to have a great player. And again, maybe if they build up some more assets, eventually they'll find that centerman that they want via trade. Or I think there's going to be some names coming available that nobody would ever think or ever thought were going to become available, and it'll get really interesting. And it's just a matter of whether people can pull off those deals at a draft. It'll be interesting. It'll be really interesting.
Is there a name off the top of your head that you just, without knowledge or information, that on the top of your head could say, I could see that guy being available? Anyone that would surprise us?
I'm not going to say the name because it's just, I think Tampa's got a couple guys that you might go, oh, wow, just when you're that deep.
Yes.
When you're that deep, and this is not, I'm not saying it's going to be Steven, but it's incredible how some of these teams lose a player along the lines, and then they're like, wow, they lost, but they were playing without this guy.
Yeah.
Now, Tampa Bay just won the Stanley Cup without one of the best players in the world, played 4 or 5 minutes. So it wouldn't have to be Steven, but if they could look at the roster and say, hey, we just won it without one piece. No, if Steven gets back in the lineup, can we win it without this piece? There's just so many special pieces that they could play with. And even St. Louis is stacked. And I mean, you look at certain teams, on the back end, Carolina's got so many defensemen now, right? It's just, it's out there. And I mean, it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be some interesting names bantered about. And as well, this goalie thing is going to be crazy.
Oh gosh. It's what a carousel that thing's going to look like.
There's years that you're sitting there just, I remember just going, oh my God, like, it's like, we need one so bad. There's just nothing out there. And now it's like, holy smokes. It's like a buffet, and they're all good. I mean, you can put them in whatever order you want, but I mean, it's just incredible. Whether they're UFAs or they're trade available, it's really quite a year for that.
Well, we'll watch Tampa Bay because that's the most intriguing one. Your Stanley Cup champions about to get dismantled to a certain extent. RFAs, will there be offer sheets? Steven Stamkos has a no move. How ugly will that be if they start pushing him out in Tampa Bay? So we'll keep an eye on that. So, Mike, are we to assume that the top three are lock, right? We've got
I would say
Lafreniere, Stetzel, and of course Byfield. You just mentioned. So those are your top three. Does it get interesting from 4 on in, because we do have the defenseman and Sanderson and Drysdale, and do we assume they're 4 and 5, or does it kind of get dicey?
Well, I think, and it gets to the point, there's two when you identify, I think it's the 2 right shot D, and I don't want to get my thing, but I'm pretty sure Drysdale for sure would separate himself as a guy that it surprised me to see get out of the top 5. I think Stevie Yzerman's got an incredible decision on his hands. I mean, I know he's not overly thrilled with the prospect pool they have, and he doesn't like, especially with his competitive nature after seeing his old team hoist it. He's going to want to get the Red Wings back to where they will be, and he will get them there. But that's just such a huge decision because there's such a premium on right shot D that can move the puck and skate like Drysdale.
Yeah.
But there's still just offensive weapons there. It's like a really interesting draft in a sense that in other years where you salivate over the first couple picks and maybe the media names the draft after, and then there's a bit of a significant drop off. There's probably another 9 players in this draft that have the chance to be really special players. And they're all different shapes and sizes. I mean, there's playmakers, like everybody talks about. Perfetti is having clearly the best hockey IQ in the draft. If you've got the 2 kids out of Ottawa and Rossi and Quinn that are just absolute studs. Drysdale, I think it's that you mentioned his name. I think it's I believe Sanderson is the next right shot D up. Yeah. So a guy like that, if you need a right shot D, those 2 guys are really going to have a premium on the two left shot D that are shortly up behind them. I think it's Gooley and Schneider are the 2 kids, but there's so many offensive weapons in there. And on top of it, you've got somebody that everybody is saying is the next NH Carey Price. So, and there's not a Russian factor to it because this kid's ready to come. This kid, I mean, I think it's best in a goaltender. You probably want him to be a star in the KHL for another year or two before you get him, and then you get a more finished product. But it's going to be really, that's one for me. It's going to be really interesting. Who steps up and takes the goaltender?
Could he go number 5 to Ottawa? Would that could that be a case? It would be really ballsy of Stevie Yzerman to take him at 4.
No, I don't think Stevie does it. I truly think that that Ottawa will go in another direction, and not be just because if you look at the market, and Pierre's done an incredible job garnering draft picks and turning these guys, these prospects. You see the young guys they got with Tkachuk coming up, and I think they got Granstrom last year from Vegas. It's a great crew, but that goalie's so special. But I think in that case, you might be looking at that huge market areas out there for goaltenders and might want to fill it that way to have somebody. So your young guys have a bit of a backstop in there. So you're getting a little bit more of that winning culture right away by having a bit more of a proven goaltender in your net in the Ottawa situation. But I could see a team, going through the process, there's only, I know Florida had drafted a top prospect that they had in the farm system. And, obviously Philadelphia has Carter Hart. So you've got Winnipeg, who's got a young studs. There's certain teams I think you can immediately cross over, but I see a team like Carolina has nothing coming up in the goaltending with the young guys. Buffalo wouldn't surprise me to see them jump up. But it'll get really interesting. I'd be surprised if he gets out of the top 10. There's no chance he gets out of the top 15.
I want to, maybe this is a conversation for another show, but as a scout, a top eye for talent in this league and in the game of hockey, I got to ask you this. Why are we not producing goaltenders maybe like we have in the past? We talk about this carousel, Foots, of goaltenders available right now, and how many are out there. But if you really break it down and you look at how old they are, we're talking about half of them being out of the league in 2 or 3 years. We're talking about 30 plus guys, 35 that are going to be gone. And it's not like there's a glutton of new goaltenders coming up. What happened? Why are we not producing more goaltenders and hearing more Askarovs out there?
I got to tell you, and I've thought about it, Kyper. I'm not sure. You can jump it up to, if you're young. I know just a lot. I have 3 little girls, so I didn't have to go through this. But you hear I know a lot of parents in the rinks, when you hear your kid's name comes up, he's going in net, they just drop their heads in shame. And they're like, I think there's a little bit of that thing, even from the youth, that it's not, it used to be like, my age group, I used to love when we played road hockey. It was like, I'm Palmatier. Like, it was a thrill to be in net and run on the street and throw the goalie stuff on and dive. And I don't think there's as much of a taste for it, whether it's the parents don't like the pressure that goes on a kid, that, when you see some parents yelling and screaming at the young kid that lets in the bad goalie, the young pressure to be a goaltender, or just the cost of the equipment. There's so many different things that might come up at a young age that makes it easier to play out, but there's really no answer for it. I know in Europe it's still amazing that in Russia it's like a factory, and there's people, because of their off ice training, and in Sweden and Finland, they just die to put this stuff on and get in net. And I don't see the same passion for it. There's certainly enough goalie schools out there, guys making money trying to turn the trick on but I don't know. I just don't see and maybe being in the younger ranks and stuff, I just don't see the same passion for kids to be you can say, I want to be the next Connor McDavid. I don't see as much kids running to be the guy in net.
I think you're bang on. I really do. I remember, my kids are all older now, but when it was my kid's turn to be the goaltender, I looked at the manager and I said, well, why don't you just ask me if he could be the referee? Because I view those jobs as the same.
Well, I even see it with my daughter's soccer. It's like when the rotation comes through, my daughter's got to go in net. I'm just like, oh my God. I hope she doesn't get a slap or get a ball in the head.
Let's hope there's parents, the next generation parents are braver than guys like me and you on holding that job. But yeah, we'll see where Askarov ends up. He's going to be a very intriguing one tonight, for sure. before I let you go, I just want to ask you in terms of, again, the COVID factor, because Foots, we are used to now seeing a draft come up in June, end of June. So now we are in, the second week in October, and I want to talk to you about the difference of development in those months and how much could it change your perspective. And I go and I watch Kotkaniemi, and he was, for all intent and purposes, for the Montreal Canadiens, a disaster this season. He got sent to the minors. People were already starting to write him off. You know what he does for 3 months? He goes and he works his ass off, and he gets stronger, and his skating looks different, and he looks like a man now. And you're like, whoa, has that happened now for prospects who are still eligible? And are we going to see a change of plans because of the growth of those last few months for some prospects, especially when it comes to maybe outside of North America, and now you're looking towards Europe more?
That's an incredible point, Kyper, and that's one I can't specifically answer because not being on the inside, but I will use my old team, the LA Kings, for example, because I know as soon as the draft went, we just load up the bags and the guys immediately, all your draft picks come to LA for development camp. And then they meet your strength and conditioning coaches and they get their summer programs and stuff. And everybody's hockey calendar is just off. It's just off. And I agree, because when Kotkaniemi came back, it was a different guy that entered the bubble. He was a horse. But I think now it's the importance of the character of the kids you're drafting, because you're going to draft some kids now that it'd be easy to say, wow, I just got drafted and take some time off. Whereas if you draft that kid with the character that's going to put the work in when the teacher's not in the studio, you're going to get a different product when it opens up again. But where they're playing, I mean, for example, I know with the hockey being played in Europe, I know the Kings sent Turcotte, I think it was Turcotte to do this, and Akil Thomas are playing for Berlin. And Mr. Anschutz owns the team in the German DHL team. So there's a development team that's working with them hands-on. I think it's going to be a whole different ball game. For example, if the Kings take Quinton Byfield, who I do believe they're going to take tonight, who now, if he's going to go down, and if they want to get him in for that hands-on treatment, the way the world is right now, he could either stay the whole summer and be trained by the LA Kings, what they might decide to do, depending on what's open. Because when I left, everything was closed in Los Angeles. I'm sure things are opening up slowly. Or if he comes back, the kid's got to quarantine for 14 days. So there's so many different things that go in. But I do think that the timelines for what, I think with the target, I think there was a meeting last night for the OHL. When is it going to start? So if Quinton Byfield, if they're going to start in October or November with the OHL, does Quinton Byfield go back to Sudbury and start his season there until the NHL opens that new camp? And is there an agreement in place with Sudbury that the minute that NHL new season starts, is he going to be released there? But I'm sure that they've got the development teams working overtime to have these guys prepared with specific plans and off-ice things that are going to have them ready. So you're going to see there's a chance, for example, when they talk about Byfield, who they talk about as he's a big kid at 220, but he's so underdeveloped that just physically, by the time the next season rolls around, he could be 235 instead of 220. So there's all these different things that are going to come into play. And as I said, it's just, as you said, it's going to be such a new world where people allocate their prospects. Again, the kids are going to immediately lose out on that development camp that they would initially be going to, to get their hats and T-shirts and get their training camps and get their all these things. Even the 48-hour rule to bring in the college is something that the college free agents for prospects, that's going to be something that's needs to be brought up. And again, what exactly are you allowed to do with them once you get them, and how do you get them home? And so it used to be just like Dean Lombardi as well. He was one of the best development general managers, but we had all the kids staying in Los Angeles. And so that's great when they can all just go into the gym and do all their things. But if there's social distancing and the hotels aren't open and different parts of the real world aren't open, it's just a whole new dynamic as far as giving them the training they need.
The great unknown, from the National Hockey League to minor hockey here in the Greater Toronto area. Foots, they shut down minor hockey till
GTHL. I heard that. It's
and
unbelievable.
Parents are pissed to hear the stories around the neighborhood of parents talking about going to, taking their kid into the U.S. To play, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he doesn't make $1 million now. You realize that, right?
When I heard that and then I saw the reactions, I was like, this is some crazy world. I mean, for me, having lived in the United States and lived and breathed the what's going on there with the presidential election and then the COVID and the sideshow that is politics down there, and now you see up here where we live and breathe hockey, and I've been back here and seen this side of it where people are just losing their marbles. Cancel the GTHL. Go ahead and cancel school.
Yes.
Before you cancel the GTHL. Okay. You're cutting into my kid's learning curve on when he's going to be a pro hockey player. Forget what you do to learn in English and math.
Yes. Now you're messing with my signing bonus, GTHL, right? But it just goes to show you the craziness. Hey, do me a favor tonight at some point when Elliot says something, just look him right in the eye and look at the camera and say, Elliot, you just made that up.
Can I tell him? Oh, by the way, Kyper says you just made that up.
Yes. Because I've seen it before. I'm
just getting used to all these earpieces and when people can't hear you and people telling you to shut up and hurry up and get moving. So I'm probably going to look like a statue tonight. I'm not going to say a bloody. It's just.
I guarantee you, your head will spin 365 right around.
I do know when I said that I was going to be speaking with you tomorrow, everybody said to say hello because of all the respect everybody has for you there.
I appreciate that. Hey, what do you do at noon now? Because Doug, Mac and I aren't on Hockey Central at noon. We're on the Real Kyper at noon show. So we assume you're just watching us every day. At least that's what I'm going to tell Doug Maclean when I got him coming up next.
You tell him that. Okay, just don't. There's the odd time I have to come in and have a little Berkey listen to see what he's got up to. But you guys are very. I mean, that's just. It's not the show itself. You guys were the chemistry you guys had along with Millard. It was epic. It was just epic, and you could tell, and you can see the same chemistry that you and it's the same chemistry you guys have on right now. You haven't missed a beat. It's great. It's great to listen. It's great to watch. I know how much we talked about how much you miss it. I mean, it's nice to get a break, and I'm going through the same thing right now. Like this is great for me, and it's exciting to learn the other side, but it's killing me to not be sitting behind a desk plugging in a name tonight. So hopefully things get back to normal. I know it's nice to listen to these guys, but again, a little bit of normalcy would be nice.
Won't be long. I know that for sure, Mike, that you'll be back at an NHL draft table one day real soon here, and we look forward to it. Mike Fuda, executive with the National Hockey League and one of the top draft guys you'll ever find. Mike, thanks for doing this. Have fun tonight with the NHL Draft with SportsNet.
Thanks, Kyper. Have a great day.
You know, Doug Maclean, my biggest mission right now is turning Mike Fuda into a TV star like I did with you, and that I wrote, of course, in my book coming out in a couple of weeks that you can pick up on Amazon and all the major outlets. Can I do that? Can I turn him into a star as big as you?
Well, I think what we've become is people want to get on this show to get their careers back on track. You know, like Fuda comes on because he thinks he's got a chance to be an assistant GM or a GM. So how can we help him? And it was basically like a job interview, which is really good. And, you know, you get Lawton, he's got the same thing going. And, you know, so, you know, I mean, May, I don't know what he wants to be, but I mean, I think we're like a job interview place to prep people, you know, so there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's great.
He's going to SportsNet tonight. I hope that's not a career killer move.
Well, that's good for him. You know, you got to keep your name out there. I mean, he's come close on a few GM jobs.
He'll be great.
I'd like to see Mike get another chance. He did a good job in LA, and you know, he's been. I just don't understand. I see some guys getting jobs, and I'm thinking, are you kidding me? But anyway, that's okay. You know.
Okay.
The draft is fun. Like I love listening to you know when he's talking about who's going to go where, and you look at you know, the top 8 or 10 names are pretty interesting, and It's always fun where he says, they're going to Byfield will go to LA at 2 and Strutzel will go to Ottawa at 3. It's kind of fun to hear that. And where does Drysdale go? Where does Perfetti go? Where does the goaltender go? Where does Quinn and Rossi? I mean, Raymond Lapierre's a kid that's gone. He was a high pick. He was right there with Lafreniere, a couple of years ago. So
he could sneak into the top 10.
Right. And he was a guy that I think he might have been the first overall pick in the Quebec League draft. And he was head to head with Lafreniere until he had vertebrae problems. So, and Jeff Sanderson's kid is kind of exciting to watch. So it's really fun to watch where all these guys are going to slide to. And it's fun to, I don't get to see the drafts anymore, but it's always fun to read about them and what the top people say about these kids. So that's exciting. I think it's really great.
Do you can tell Mike Fuda is itching to get back in and he misses it a lot. Do you miss it? Because I would go to these things year after year, Mac, and it's one giant party too as well. Don't kid yourself. I mean, no, with all due respect to the hard work that these guys go in there, and it's an important week, but it's also a chance for organizations to spend a shitload of money. To me, it was the biggest waste I've ever seen, Mac.
But you know what?
How many people that you guys brought in, and I'm talking, there's more driftwood around an NHL draft than I've ever seen before. You guys complain about money all year long, and then you piss it away at the draft on hundreds of people. Why would you have done that all those years?
I know we did. We had some great dinners, We used to have some great draft dinners.
How much would you stroke a check? How much in Columbus did the draft cost you?
I don't know the actual number. I mean, our scouting department cost us probably, almost $1.5 million a year is what we'd spend on our scouting, and probably more than that. I can't imagine where it is. But I'll tell you what. As a general manager, it was the most exciting week of the year. It really was, because you'd go into the city on the Tuesday, you'd have your staff come in, you'd bring your pro scouts, you'd have your coaching staff. It's the one time a year you have everybody there. Your coaches, your scouts, your pro guys would be in there as well. And it was just the camaraderie of your group there. And you know what? It's not just the draft. Sure, the draft is the number one focus, but you're also discussing buyouts. You're discussing free agency. It's nonstop trade calls coming. You're in your suite. You've got your executive assistant in there. You've got the scouts in the suite next door to you adjoining, and you're back and forth taking calls, talking trades, talking free agency. It's unbelievable. It was the most, and you go to bed. I mean, we did the Nash deal at 3:00 in the morning when we moved up from 3 to 1 to get Nash with Florida. I mean, it was without a doubt the most exciting week of the year as a general manager
and as a broadcaster, Mac.
I loved it.
For a broadcaster, for someone that likes to get on the inside of some stuff, it was the best 3-4 days you can spend, because everybody is under one roof. And all you needed to do, Mac, was sit at the bar late at night, and you'd be having a beer, talking to a few people, and then somebody would start yapping, and you're like, "Who are you, the president of the Booster Club?" And he's like, "No, I'm their Eastern Scout." And I'm like, "Okay, come on, we need to have a drink."
But you know what? And the stuff that used to get out, I mean, I'll never forget it. Hearing at 2:00 in the morning that, the Islanders were going to take the goaltender first in the 2000 draft, which means we were getting one of Gaborik or Heatley or Klesla. Those were the next three names that we had. And then we kept hearing Atlanta were considered taking Klesla. And I'm thinking, geez, you mean I got a chance? Our guy that we desperately wanted that draft was Gaborik. We had Gaborik, Heatley, Klesla, 1, 2, 3, the goalie 4th. And then, you hear, I get a call at 2:30 in the morning from my chief scout. I'm hearing the goalie's going 1. I'm hearing the goalie's going 1. And we're fired up about that. So it was full out hockey nonstop. And then when you finish the first round, you go back to the suite. to get prepared for the second and third and right through to the seventh round. So it was even at the table, the excitement that you go through. So it's a fun time.
Well, we know it's business as usual, or at least you got to pretend it's business as usual, but it really isn't. It isn't, because of the pandemic, because ownership has new mandates, including internal salary caps. But you got to assume, as a general manager, you got to go about your business. And I think that's what they're trying to do, Mac. And that's why we hear so much talk. But talk hasn't really lent to action. We know up until this point, we see a lot more names being bought out. Abdicator in Detroit, 3 more years at 4.25, Mac. He's out. Carl Asner's off the books. Jack Johnson the other day. Hinostroza in Arizona. The buyouts are coming, and they're going to flood the market, Mac. That's essentially what they're going to do. They're going to push more UFAs into that market, and they're going to lower the bar.
And then you've got the situation where you've got big names. You've got Tampa Bay with Tyler Johnson's name out there all of a sudden. We've talked about that for a week or more on this show. What will Tyler Johnson waive? All of a sudden, he's given some names maybe. So could Tyler Johnson's $5+ million be moved? And teams line it up. Look, you got Philadelphia's name involved in the
hold on. Don't jump all over the place. Let's stay with Tampa Bay for a split second here, because we know Bob McKenzie talked about untouchables, and we know that the impression is that Stamkos might somehow be squeezed into a scenario by Tampa Bay. Can you imagine days, a week after winning the Stanley Cup, now you see any scenario where Tampa Bay goes, we know you have a no move, but we'd like to get you out? Like, do they really have the balls to go up to Steven Stamkos and talk about that?
You know what? There's been rumblings, Cooper, Stamkos for a number of years. I mean, how much does he love Stamkos? A new general manager. We know Stevie Y put lots of pressure on Stammer to take the deal when that was going on. Would it surprise me? Look, this is desperate times for teams to keep their teams to play in place. They won a cup essentially without Stamkos. You love Stammer, but with the injuries, man, I don't know how whether they're going to say it, Nick, they're considering it. Whether they're going to say it, they've got to be considering it.
Okay.
And I would not want to make that call to Stammer or to Newport and say, we're looking at it.
If I'm Stammer, I'm saying, hold on for a second. I took 8-5 when we know the Leafs were going to go to 10+, 11. I took 8-5. And I bought myself with $2.5 million a no move clause.
I know.
Okay. And now you guys are coming up to me. Are you kidding me?
But do you think they wouldn't be? I mean, this is a way to fix some serious problems, because they've got to get Sergachev and Sorella signed. They got to get those two guys signed. And how do they go about it with $5 million or so? I would hate to make that call about Stamkos. I would hate to even consider it getting out, because he's such a quality guy.
It's out.
I don't know. Where you, like you say, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah.
And where I say, I'm not telling you it's the truth, I'm just telling you what I heard. I don't know what's going on here. But if Bob McKenzie mentions it, that gives me some credibility with that.
Hey, guys, I have a question for you, actually. Doug, this is mostly directed at you, but Kyper obviously would love to hear your opinion. The other day when we spoke about the Rangers potentially trading a pick and stuff like that, a lot of people said they'll never do it. It's clickbait, slow day. But then we have this massive value of a young goaltender, all that stuff. My question to you, Doug, and I think the people in chat would like to know as well, what are you discussing in these moments, and what's off limits? Like, from my perspective, you have a number 1 pick. I'm always taking calls. You could call me. I'll listen. I'll see what's up. But what's off the table in these days leading up to the draft and free agency because of ancillary things?
I don't think anything's off the table, because sometimes you get calls and it sort of catches you off guard. And I think you got to listen to every call. So I don't think there's anything off limits. I mean, where's this goaltender go? We heard Nick talk to Mike Fuda about that. The Montreal Canadiens took Price at 5. Most people thought it was crazy at the time. I remember Pierre Maguire going on national TV saying, I can't believe they took Price. How would they let their fans down by taking Price at number 5? Well, that's turned out to be a pretty good pick, and he ate his words for a while after that. But nothing's off limits. You got to be open to everything, because this is a time when everybody's in the same mode, making trades, working on picks. Nobody likes to move their first pick. If there's anything that's off limit, is nobody likes to move the first overall pick. That is a tough one to do. That takes a lot, and that's why we don't see it happen very often.
You got to be realistic too. If you're another team and you're approaching teams, okay, right. It would be stupid of any team now to call up Tampa Bay and say, "Hey, I want to talk about Braden Point or Hedman." Okay, it's not happening.
No, but people will phone Nick and ask about a first pick.
Yeah,
everybody. Like I remember phoning George McPhee. Is there any way you will consider moving your first pick? Well, everybody, it was Ovechkin. I mean, there's no damn, but you make the call. Would you consider moving the first pick? You know what? I phoned Dudley. Would you consider flipping with me? I didn't think he would do it, but we worked it out. So you just don't know.
I guarantee you when Edmonton was drafting McDavid, nobody embarrassed themselves to call the Edmonton Oilers up and say, "Hey, would you listen to this for that pick?" So you're not stupid. You're not going to embarrass yourself. But it's not for Kevin Adams in Buffalo or anyone else. It's not embarrassing to call the New York Rangers and say, "Hey, listen, we know you have a glutton of wingers and you need some help at center. Would you consider this?" So,
well, especially when you're talking first overall and you're talking Eichel, that's a star. You know what I mean? You're talking a star there, so that's an easy call to make. If Buffalo did, in fact, or vice versa, if the Rangers, whoever initiated the call there. But anyway, look, this is a very unique and exciting time with the pandemic because of all the movement we're going to see over the next little month. We're talking all this, and you still haven't brought up your pet peeve that you mentioned 3 weeks ago, and that's Laine. What the hell is going on with Laine?
Well, it's abundantly clear, Mac, that Winnipeg want this done. They don't want it to drag into another season. They don't want it to drag in the off season, whenever that may be, till the start of next season. We don't know what that is, but they want it off the books. I had heard that Philadelphia probably is the team that is closest to maybe getting something done. But again, we're really talking about teams that have to really understand what it's going to take to get Patrick Laine signed long-term. So Philly would have to, like any team, have to move money out as well. But I'm hearing, you hear about Gostisbehere going back to Winnipeg. I also heard the name Nolan Patrick, when we know the health issues there. But maybe Winnipeg would be willing to take a chance that he can recover and maybe turn into that second line centerman that they're looking at. That's a possibility. But Mac, these aren't easy deals to make.
Well, look at who Philly have right now. They've got JVR on a bad contract. Hayes is on a big contract. Voracek is on a big contract. Giroux is on a big contract. And you mentioned Gostisbehere. Like you're 100% right. Some money has got to go back. A big amount of money have got to go back to help the Flyers move ahead, because they think they're getting close to being a contender. Losing Niskanen with retirement doesn't help their case right now with their top 4 blue liners, but they've got some contracts there that have got to be moved, and you're 100% right on that.
I had an NHL executive ask me if I thought that the Flyers could be in play for Pietrangelo now that Niskanen's 5.25 is off the books, and maybe a player that they didn't anticipate to lose, right-handed shot. Maybe, but again, you got to find a way to move more money out for the Philadelphia Flyers to even get into that sweepstakes. And right now, all we hear is Vegas or St. Louis when it comes to Pietrangelo. Could Flyers get into this?
Well, yeah. And I mean, look, when I go cross team by team, the number of people that are desperate for a first or second right shot defenseman is absolutely scary. We keep hearing Vegas over and over again. You've mentioned some names that could be up in Vegas for movement. Look, there's St. Louis. I think St. Louis are pissed off. I think they think Vegas have been tampering a bit here and have been talking. I guess I would have to say, who doesn't tamper?
Well,
you're not tampering. You're not trying.
You know,
as long as you don't get caught.
And you would know that better than anybody. But it just seems now, Mac, that you know, there are some concerns out of the St. Louis Blue organization, and the mere fact that that's gotten out public already suggests to you probably how pissed they are at Vegas.
Oh, you can only imagine,
right?
You know, so
speaking of Vegas, Mac, you know, there is a sense that there's a tie between ownership and Marc-Andre Fleury that doesn't necessarily say that he might get traded or bought out. Again, people are suggesting to me quite possibly they could start the next season, whenever that is, with $12 million worth of goaltenders.
And who are they moving out to make that work?
Well, Mac, that's where it kind of gets interesting. This is where I think George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon are going to have to find ways to be creative here. But all of a sudden, you know, you look down at a glutton of forwards that are making $5 million or close to it and more. And I think I count 7 of them. Alex Tuck at 4.7, Marchessault at 5, Riley, Carlson, Stastny, Pacioretty, and Stone. That's a lot. You can't keep everybody. So, you know, Marchessault is not a name that we thought, you know, was necessarily going to get shopped anytime soon, but didn't have the best playoff run. And at $5 million, he could be attractive to move. The other name that I hear possibly to move off the books, Mac, and this is a name that I don't think we've heard so far, is Nate Schmidt. He just signed a long-term extension, and he's just under $6 million to fit in Pietrangelo to move out Nate Schmidt. I think moving out Martinez's next contract at $4 million is a possibility as well. Even if you get a 4th or a 5th round pick for Martinez, that's easy to get $4 million off the books. It could free enough money to not only sign Pietrangelo, moving some of these names I mentioned, but also keep Fleury in the rotation.
Well, I can see, look, we said it throughout the playoffs. This blue line in Vegas is not a Stanley Cup blue line. And after Theodore, there's a drop-off. Martinez dropped as the playoffs went on. He dropped off a touch. He had a lot of wear and tear. Schmidt is a guy that lots of people like. He's a puck mover. He's a character guy, a popular guy. I could see Schmidt being an attractive alternative to a lot of teams as a puck moving type of guy that fits in with a lot of teams. So, you know what? You're getting Pietrangelo, but you're giving up ephemeral. Marchessault is interesting. Marchessault really believes he's the captain of this team. And when Mark Stone becomes captain, I don't think that's going to sit very well with a Marchessault. So what happens there, that will be interesting to watch. So lots of interesting things to watch in Las Vegas.
OEL. That's all. Is that story just starting, or is it about to end this week? If he pulls off Vancouver and Boston on his list, and he just says, "No, I ain't going anywhere."
Well, look, I'm a little confused with Vancouver wanting another. They got Hughes as a left shot. Don't you want a right shot guy there? Why do you want Hughes and OEL, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 2 left-hand shots? I just don't see this. And I know he's a good player. I get that. He hasn't done enough for me to be anywhere close to the $8 million. The way, in my opinion, he's dropped off. Is it a bad situation? Has it been a bad situation? The Bruins, to me, I mean, why would you go there versus just re-signing Krug? and saving some money. So either team, there's got to be some big contracts go back. It's got to be a money exchange here, like you talk about Vegas. It's got to be the same thing with OEL. Some big money have got to leave the books here that they don't want. Is it a Beagle? Is it a Sutter? Is it a Roussel?
Well,
somebody at $3.5 million has got to leave that team.
I think this is the way it's kind of been explained to me, Mac, is that what needs to happen is now you've got a new general manager who's never really experienced any of this before and doesn't necessarily have the tools to go up to his new owner and say, buddy, this isn't happening. Okay. We've got 8.25 on the books with this guy for 7 more years. And you are 2 years away from stroking a signing bonus check for over $5 million. So
they want him out.
We're on the clock here.
They want him out of there.
But I can't give away this. Okay. I can't even drop the keys off and walk away because we don't have any teams that want to pick up all that money.
Not a chance.
So we need to
They're idiots if they do. If they pick up that 8, they're crazy.
We need to find a different way here, which means you got to eat money. Okay? You're not getting it all off your books. And people are saying that, that's a tough conversation for Bill Armstrong to have with his ownership group who just hired him, that's not realistic.
Because in the interview that Bill Armstrong had with the ownership, it was a lot of the time was involving Oliver Ekman-Larsson. Let's not kid ourselves. And anybody else, they can get off their books there for money.
Well, and that's where it gets a little dicey, I think, for Bill Armstrong. And someone mentioned to me that maybe part of the interview included of, I can get a package for OEL like we got a package for Ryan O'Reilly from the Boston Bruins, which was 3 players and 2 draft picks.
Right.
And, Bill Armstrong watched it, right? He watched that deal. He was a member of the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah.
So, no, it's apples to oranges right now. And oh, by the way, OEL ain't Ryan O'Reilly.
And like, I'm still bothered by OEL because I tooted his horn 3 or 4 years ago that he's going to be a perennial Norris Trophy candidate. And you know what? I'm sorry. I'm missing him a lot of nights. So he better, wherever he goes, it's got to be a lot better than what I've seen lately.
Anything out? What else is out there tickling your fancy? Our season ticket subscribers at MLSE excited about Jason Spezza retiring. They signed their tough guy. That's out of their way.
They're going crazy in Toronto. They got Spezza back, and Kyle Dubas says he likes having Freddie Anderson back in all likelihood. So they're really ecstatic in Toronto. And then what I like best of all, and you and I discussed this off air, Kyle Dubas says we have to be tougher to play against.
Well, no shit, Sherlock.
Oh my God Almighty. What a revelation. So Kyle has got, so I think that somebody said Brendan Shanahan should get a little more involved. I think Brendan probably mentioned, along with 1 million other people, or maybe 5 million people that have said the Leafs have got to be tougher to play against. I mean, go back and look at how you fix the Leafs. Good grief. I think it was mentioned.
I think Kyle Dubas figured out real quickly where that marketplace is that we talked about earlier. When you can't create anything out of Frederik Andersen, and Freddie's a good goalie that I think could have a much better time of shining in the playoffs if he had a real blue line. But
Freddie's not their problem. I've said this numerous times. I like him as a goalie. I know he hasn't won, but you're right. Give him a couple of good, solid defensemen, and you might see a little difference and some grit up front. But anyway, we've tried to help the Leafs for a long time, you and I. over the years, we consistently try to help them. Obviously, you, because of your loyalty as an alum, but we have tried to help them.
Yes, and also the cookies are really good in the alumni room. Right?
Anyway, it's going to be an exciting few days.
Anything else?
Yeah, one other thing. I just got a comment.
What do you want?
Jill just said, get it over with. She's waiting for me to go to lunch.
Does Jill not know that you work for me right now?
I work for you.
Jill
and
makes
Jill.
the rules, man. I don't want to cause any fights here.
Get over yourself and get it over with.
All right. Any more comments? Jordan, anything else out there that we could just stretch out Mac a little longer now to really get him in trouble with Jill?
What's on the menu? Are we doing a multi-course deal or just a simple sandwich? I think the people in chat, Yoda, is very curious about your diet.
We're going to head to the Summerside Yacht Club just for a snack because obviously son Clark is going to join us, so it's just a family little get-together lunch at the yacht club. So it's great.
Does the RV have one of those pull out a side patio with an umbrella or anything like that?
Well, no. What it has is it's got the extension on one side that makes the living room a little bigger, and then we have the awning that is for evening cocktails that pulls out the awning. So, by the way, headed down yesterday and got it washed, all ready for the trip, hand washed in Charlottetown, filled with propane, and we're ready to roll.
I can't wait to give it away next year for blitzbet.eu.
Oh, Jill, did you hear that?
All right, Mac, we'll leave the last word to you. Quiet NHL draft tonight, or are we going to get some rumblings?
I think it's going to be quiet tonight, and I think that the trading will start just barely after the draft, I think, is when the trading is going to go. I think we're going to see it really pick up, but I think it'll be a little bit after the draft.
Okay, and we're gonna have you back on later on in the week. We're gonna do a follow up as well. We're gonna tee up unrestricted free agency on Friday. So plenty more still to come this week from the Real Kyper at Noon show. Doug Maclean, thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch and lay off the salt. Okay. I don't like what it does to your blood pressure.
Okay, man.
All right. Doug Maclean, everybody from Summerside PEI. Also want to take this opportunity one more time to thank Mike Fuda. It was a terrific insight into the draft tonight. All of you will be watching him, of course, on SportsNet and various stations throughout the United States with NBC as well. Enjoy the draft. Cheer on your team. And we will speak soon on the Real Kyper at Noon show. Thanks, everybody, for joining.